Hey folks, Mr. G here again with another educational video. This time we're going to be talking about coins. We've got two examples, and part of these examples I want to try and remind you what the different coin values are, and there's actually two different ways we can deal with these types of problems. Stephen has 7 more dimes than quarters. He has 350 in total. How many coins of each type are there? Let's take out our highlighter. So 7 more dimes than quarters, he has 350 total, and how many coins of each type? That's what we're really looking for. So we're going to have two answers here. We have two different types of coins. There's going to be a number of each type. Now I want to remind you, if you're not familiar with dimes and quarters, I know change has become less common as we've had credit cards and other electronic ways of paying for goods. So if you don't remember, a dime here, this is worth 10 cents, which is the same as $0.1. Now a quarter here is worth 25 cents or $0.25. Now the two ways that you can try and solve these types of problems is either to put everything in terms of pennies, so cents, or to put everything in terms of dollars. There's no wrong way to do it. You just have to make sure that whatever you're doing with your change also matches your total over here. For the first example, I'm going to do this with dollars and show you how that works. Before we can do that, we've got to set up some variables. We don't know how many quarters there are, so we're going to call the number of quarters X, and we know there are 7 more dimes as compared to quarters, so the number of dimes would be X plus 7. To get our equation, we know that we have a total value of $3.50, and that's equal to how many quarters we have and how many dimes we have. But they don't count for the same amount. Our quarters count for 25 cents or $0.25, so here we need to multiply by 0.25. If, for instance, we had 4 quarters, 4 times 0.25 gives us $1, which makes sense. 4 quarters makes $1. Similarly, for the number of dimes, we have to multiply by the value of a dime, which is 0.1. But remember, we're multiplying it by the total number of dimes here, so it's not just 0.1 times X. We need to put brackets around these because this 0.1 is going to be multiplied by both. Now that we have everything in our equation all set up, first thing I'm going to do is distribute my decimal over here. And you should end up with something like this. If you need to pull out a calculator when we're doing decimals like this, that's not a huge deal. But remember, we want to eventually get integers at the end, so we're going to have to get rid of these decimals. You can't have a fraction number or a decimal number of quarters. You can't have 0.75 quarters. So to get rid of our decimals, we're going to have to multiply through by a power of 10. In this case, we have some places with 2 decimal places, some places with 1 decimal place. So we're going to have to multiply by a 1 with 2 zeros, in other words, multiplying by 100. Don't forget this 100 is going to multiply every single piece in our equation, and you should end up with something like this. A reminder that when we're multiplying through by a power of 10, however many zeros here is the number of times we're moving the decimal place. So over here, we move our decimal place twice, we move it over twice, move it over twice. In this case, since there's no second thing here, we put a 0 there, so this is going to be a 10. And similarly over here, we move it twice and we would get a 70. Now that we've got rid of all of our decimals, this is exactly like all of our other questions. We're going to gather like terms, move the numbers onto one side, and we're going to solve our equation. We've got 2 x's over here that we can simplify together. And at the same time, I'm going to move this 70 over to the other side by subtracting 70 from both sides. We should end up with something like this. Divide both sides by 35, and we get our answer of x equals 8. Remember that this has 2 answers, so we got to make sure that we're stating both of our answers in this case. Our number of quarters is just equal to x, as we can see here, so that's just 8. And our number of dimes is 7 more, which is 15. Now, just like our age problems, these ones aren't too difficult to check. All we need to do is count up all of the money that we have here. So we would do 8 times 0.25 for our quarters, and 15 times 0.1 for our dimes. If you want to pull out a calculator here, you're more than welcome to. When we do this part, we'll end up with 2. When we do this part, we'll end up with 1.5, and we get a total of 3.5, which is the same as 350, which is what we were told in the question. So we know we got this one right. So here's our next problem. We're told that Frank has $1.20 in change, and it's 60 coins that include pennies and nickels. How many of each type does he have? Let's take out our highlighter. So the important information is the total, how many coins we have, and the fact that they're all pennies and nickels. We want to find how many of each type there is. So again, we're going to have 2 answers. In this case, I'm going to show you the other way you can deal with these coin problems, which is to take everything and instead of having it in dollars, we have it in terms of cents. So in this case, $1.20 is 120 cents. To go between the two, all we're doing is moving our decimal place twice and recognizing that there are 100 cents in a dollar. We also probably want a reminder on what pennies are. I know we actually don't have any of those in circulation anymore. They were taken out for Canadian currency, but they're worth 1 cent, and a nickel is worth 5 cents. Now that we've broken down our problem, let's define some variables. I'm going to call the number of pennies that we have x in this case. Now the number of nickels, we're not told it's like 5 more or 10 more, but we're told that there's a total of 60. To help us understand how we can do this in terms of x, let's think, for instance, if we were told that we have 5 pennies. How many nickels would that be? Well, if there's a total of 60, the remainder has to be nickels, so it would be 60 minus 5, so we would have 55 nickels. So if we don't know the number of pennies, we're calling that x. The number of nickels would be the remainder, which would be 60 minus x. Once we have our variables set up like this, we can again use the same sort of equation that we did last question. Our total of 120 cents is going to be equal to the number of pennies and the number of nickels, but we need to multiply the number of pennies by their value, which in this case is 1 cent. We need to do the same thing for the nickels, and don't forget we want brackets because this 5 cents is being multiplied by everything here. This 60 minus x is getting multiplied by 5. This whole thing right here is the number of nickels, not just the 60, not just the minus x. Let's get rid of our brackets by distributing. Now, I really like turning everything into cents as opposed to dollars, which I showed in the first example, because as you can see, all of our decimals are already gone. And all we have to do is move all of the numbers to one side, all the x's to the other. We'll combine some like terms here and move the 300 to the other side by subtracting 300. And we should end up with this equation, negative 180 equals negative 4x. Now you might be thinking, that's weird, I wasn't expecting negatives. But in this case, since we have negatives on both sides, that's not a big deal. They're going to cancel out in just a second. When we divide both sides by negative 4, remember a negative divided by a negative gives us a positive. So we'll end up with x on our right side and 45 on the left. Now we've almost got our answer here. Remember that we have two answers. We want to know the number of pennies and the number of nickels. So the number of pennies is equal to x, which is 45. The number of nickels is the rest out of 60, so 60 minus 45, which is 15. To finish off here, let's just do a quick check, make sure we got the right answer. And we do the same check where we take our number of pennies and multiply by the value of a penny, which is 1 cent, plus the number of nickels times the value of a nickel, which is 5 cents, which if you add together, you get 120 cents, which is the same as our question, $1.20. That's the end of the problems here. I encourage you to now go to your workbook and the worksheet that I posted for you. Try out some of the questions, and if the quiz has been posted, you can try that out as well. See you in the next video.